Have you ever noticed that almost everything we call life happens before your eyes without you really being aware of it? Conversations, choices, memories, pains, and desires pile up like successive waves, and you run from one to another, believing you are nothing more than what you feel, what you react to. But there is an invisible, silent, incandescent point from which everything can be seen without being dragged along. This point does not belong to the stories, but is the one who watches them. In quantum physics, there is the so-called observer effect. The mere presence of the one who observes changes the result of an experiment. The electron that seemed undefined takes on position the moment someone looks at it. In the same way, what you believe to be solid and inevitable also takes shape according to the way you contemplate it. Looking is creating. And yet we live as if we were trapped only in the current of events, forgetting that we can also choose from where we look. The oldest spirituality already intuited this. We are not only characters who act, suffer, and desire. We are also the silent witness, the one who does not age, who does not get confused, who only sees. When accessing this place, a shift happens. You are no longer only the pain or the joy. You become the one who contemplates them. This is the crack through which transformation begins, not in controlling what comes to you, but in discovering that there is an inner space that observes everything without losing itself. From this point are born clarity, freedom, and the power to recreate reality itself. You realize that by changing the position from which you look, reality is no longer the same. What once seemed an insurmountable wall may reveal itself to be nothing more than a drawing on the wall. It is in this subtle shift that the role of the observer begins to take clearer shape. Quantum science confirms something that the ancients already sensed. Consciousness is not passive. It is not limited to recording what happens. On the contrary, its mere presence reshapes the scene. Think of the double-slit experiment, where particles behave in a completely different way if they are being observed. The electron, which could disperse in multiple paths, takes on a defined trace at the moment it is seen. This confronts us with a disturbing idea. The act of observing is not neutral. To observe is to interfere. To observe is to create. And within your life, this principle also manifests itself in less visible but equally decisive dimensions. When you are taken over by an emotion, let's say anger, it feels as though it is everything that exists. You confuse yourself with it. You react from it, as if you were being dragged by a raging river. But the moment something within you recognizes, there is anger in me now, a new space is born. This simple recognition is already an act of observation, and in that instant anger ceases to be an absolute tyrant and becomes a transient phenomenon within your experience. You are not the anger, you are the one who witnesses it. This change in perspective opens up a new freedom, the freedom not to respond automatically. The same applies to the deepest pains. A loss, for example, can imprison the mind in incessant memories. But by adopting the position of the observer, you cease to be only the wound and become also the presence that notices the wound. This presence is not reduced to mourning, to crying, or to absence. It remains intact, even if everything around seems to collapse. It is like a flame that continues to burn in the midst of the wind. Curiously, this quality of observation is not limited to the psychological field. It resonates in the physical body. Research in neuroscience shows that the act of observing one's own internal states changes brain circuits. The practice of mindfulness, for example, activates areas associated with self-regulation, reducing automatic patterns of reactivity. In other words, by becoming the observer, you literally restructure your brain. The invisible shapes the visible, and in the spiritual field, this stance has been called witness, spark, essence. Different names for the same core, the point within you that never completely confuses itself with what happens. It is as if there were a secret room within your consciousness, a space where everything can be seen without immediate judgment. This space is what allows you not only to live, but also to realize that you are living. But here is something even more surprising. It is not enough to just observe to be free. It is necessary to observe with real presence, not as a cold detachment, but as a radical openness to what happens. To be an observer does not mean to isolate yourself from the experience. but to be in it consciously. When you look at your sadness, you do not deny it, but welcome it without letting it be your only identity. When you look at your joy, you savor it without getting lost in dependence. In both cases, observation brings you back to the center. We can say, then, that transformation begins in this seemingly simple gesture, shifting from the identity of the one who suffers to the identity of the one who witnesses the suffering. This shift changes your relationship with everything. It changes the way you speak, act, decide. It is not an effort to control the external world, but to access the consciousness that inhabits it. And there is something profoundly liberating in this practice, realizing that you are not a prisoner of the flow of thoughts, emotions, or circumstances. The observer in you is like the horizon, always present, even if storms temporarily cover the sky. In rediscovering this horizon, you find that reality is not reduced to what passes before your eyes. There is always more. It is in this field of perception that true transformation germinates, not in the superficial changes that come and go, but in reconnecting with the silent presence that observes everything without losing itself in anything. The true power of the observer is precisely this, allowing you to recognize your own vastness before every small wave that rises and disappears. If at first observation seemed to be only an act of distancing, now it reveals its creative nature. To observe is not just to notice, it is to open a space where reality can be reinvented. It is like being in front of a stage where the actors move automatically until your attention changes the script. Not because you command, but because your presence changes the scene. Think of the water of a lake. While the surface is agitated, everything seems distorted. The trees around break apart. The moon dissolves into shattered reflections. But when the water rests, what was confused shows itself whole. Conscious observation is this rest. It does not force calm, but invites turbulence to reorganize. By taking the place of observer, you allow what seemed chaotic to find another arrangement. There are spiritual traditions that speak of an invisible breath that runs through everything. It is not only the air that goes in and out, but a pulse that keeps each atom vibrating. To observe is to synchronize with this secret breath. When you observe an emotion, it is as if you allow your very body to be breathed by something greater. Anger, sadness, joy, all become waves of this same breath, and you discover that none of them can imprison the one who witnesses. This practice is not only contemplative, it can be felt in the body. Close your eyes for a few moments and bring your attention to the sounds around you. Do not try to classify them as pleasant or unpleasant. Just notice. Perhaps a distant noise, the echo of a voice, the whisper of the wind. Gradually something inverts. You are no longer someone who hears sounds, but the space in which the sounds happen. This simple change shows the strength of the observer, becoming the field in which everything manifests instead of being captured by every detail. It is interesting to note how the science of the mind also recognizes this process. Contemporary psychology describes the phenomenon of metacognition, the ability to think about one's own thoughts. But while for science this is a brain function, in spiritual traditions it is seen as the first step toward liberation. After all, thought ceases to be sovereign when you realize you can observe it. The same applies to emotions. They cease to command your life when you recognize that they exist without confusing yourself with them. Metaphorically, the observer can be seen as the keeper of a lighthouse in the fog. The ships that pass are your emotions, memories, expectations. Some bring good news, others seem threatening. But no ship defines the lighthouse. The lighthouse only illuminates constant, indifferent to the movement of the waters. You are not each ship that arrives or leaves, you are the light that makes them visible. By practicing this stance, you begin to notice something profound. It is not the experience that decides who you are, but the gaze you cast upon it. Pain can be just pain, or it can turn into learning. Joy can be just passing euphoria, or it can become gratitude. What makes the difference is not the event itself, but the observer who embraces it. This shift has an unexpected effect. Reality, once rigid, becomes malleable. What once seemed a closed fate begins to open into possibilities. To observe is not to remain passive before life. It is to activate the field where life can be recreated. And in this field, even what seemed definitive takes on new forms. We can turn this reflection into an exercise. Try looking at a memory that still weighs on you. Do not try to change it, nor to identify with it. Just notice that there is a part of you capable of observing it. Feel how, by becoming the observer, the memory loses part of its weight. It continues to exist, but no longer has the same hold. This is the beginning of alchemy, transforming the experience not by erasing it, but by seeing it from another place. To observe, in this sense, is not just a mental gesture. It is a vibrational practice, almost like tuning an instrument. You adjust the string of consciousness until it resonates in harmony with something greater, and in this harmony, life begins to reorganize from the inside out. Until now, everything seemed to point to a clarity. To observe is to open space, to create an inner distance. But what if this vision is still incomplete? What if the observer is not just a neutral point that watches, but also an agent that participates in the very scene? You may have believed that the observer is synonymous with detachment, with a stance that sees everything from the outside. But look again. Even this outside may be an illusion. The observer is not separate from what is observed. It is not a cold camera recording events. It vibrates along, alters the field, shapes the fabric of experience. The act of seeing is already an act of touching. In physics, this idea is unsettling. A simple look changes the trajectory of the particle. The electron does not follow the same path after being measured. Similarly, when you become aware of an emotion, you are not just a spectator describing it. You have already transformed it. It is as if observation were an invisible alchemy that reconstructs the matter of what is lived. This turn can be uncomfortable because it dismantles a silent belief that there is a clear line between I who observe and the world that happens. In fact, this line is porous. The observer is in the world as much as the world is in the observer. The field of life is not divided into two parts. It is a single fabric, which pulses with every conscious look. Think of a musician tuning his instrument. The string vibrates and the sound expands through the space. The musician's ear does not only record this sound. By hearing it, by responding to it, the musician is already altering the next note. Listening is not passive, it is creative. Likewise, your consciousness does not merely record what it feels or thinks. It influences, adjusts, reorganizes. You are not only the one who sees the scene, you are part of the scene being modified by your own gaze. This understanding changes everything, because until now, perhaps you believed that the power of the observer was only to endure, to welcome, to resist, without losing itself. But there is something greater. The observer is the very force that gives birth to new possibilities. When you look at a repetitive pattern of pain, you're not just recognizing it, you are opening the door for it to dissolve. When you observe a fear, you are already changing the way it acts within you. It is not about denying experiences, but about recognizing that they are not closed in on themselves. Nothing is static before the conscious gaze. That is why so many spiritual traditions describe observation as a kind of subtle fire. It burns away the illusion that we are captives. And the clearer the flame of the observer, the more the rigid outlines of experience dissolve. Here lies the rupture. To observe is not to withdraw from life. To observe is to recreate it as it happens. The observer is not a distant refuge. It is a creative, active center that breathes together with each moment. This perception causes an inner shock, because suddenly you understand that you were never just watching. Every time you looked at yourself with presence, you were already altering the path of your story. And this opens an invitation. How can you use this gaze now? In what way can you choose to observe your own life, not as repetition, but as the possibility of recreation? And it is at this point that I want to ask you something. If this turn made sense to you, like this video, but go further. In the comments, write the phrase, I choose to recreate through the gaze. This simple declaration is not just an interaction. It is a way of sealing within yourself the commitment to become not only a spectator, but a conscious creator of the reality you observe. If the observer is not only a spectator but a creator, then we need images that help us feel this truth more deeply. The mind can understand, but it is the heart that makes it alive. That is why myths cross centuries. They guard in symbols what cannot fit only into reasoning. It is told in an ancient tradition that there was a craftsman capable of shaping metals so precisely that each sword carried not only the strength of the iron, but also the vibration of the one who wielded it. One day, this craftsman received the visit of a young warrior. The young man carried in his eyes the weight of past battles and asked for a blade that would give him victory. The craftsman listened in silence and then said to him, "It is not the sword that wins. It is the gaze of the one who sustains it." Intrigued, the warrior remained in the workshop observing the creation process. For days, the craftsman heated the metal, folded, cooled, hammered. But the strangest detail was that before each strike, he closed his eyes, as if he were conversing with something invisible. When the young man asked why, the craftsman replied, "I do not shape only the iron. I shape the field that surrounds it." With each strike, it is not only the metal that changes, but also the intention that observes it. When he finally received the sword, the warrior realized that it was no different in appearance from the others. But when holding it, something changed. It was not the blade that gave him power, it was the awareness that he could choose how to look at it, how to feel it, how to integrate it into his own energy. The weapon became only a reflection of his inner state. The craftsman had taught him, without saying it directly, that the gaze shapes reality more than matter itself. This story echoes within us because it translates the revelation of the observer. Nothing is neutral before the attention we give. An emotion can be a sword that wounds or an instrument that awakens clarity. A memory can be prison or a source of wisdom. Everything depends on the quality of the gaze we place upon it. The warrior, upon leaving the workshop, did not carry only a sword. He carried the discovery that he was not a prisoner of battles, but the creator of the way he would face each of them. This is the point at which myth meets real life, because we too, in daily life, wield invisible tools, words, gestures, thoughts. Each of these tools is shaped by the state of the observer who sustains it. By remembering this narrative, you may realize that in your own story, there were similar moments. Moments when a situation seemed harsh, but by changing the way you saw it, it opened into learning. Or moments when a simple word, spoken with presence, completely changed the course of a relationship. The craftsman is within each of us, striking the hammer upon the iron of experience. But the true forge is not in the metallic sound, it is in the consciousness that looks and gives meaning to each blow. This is the symbolic power we need to recover, to understand that life does not hand us only facts but raw materials. It is up to the observer to decide whether this metal becomes prison or freedom. The young warrior understood that the sword was not his salvation, his gaze was. And perhaps this is the greatest reminder. Transformation does not happen because we can control everything around us. It begins the moment we recognize that each event carries within itself the possibility of being seen in another way. The awakened observer is the craftsman of his own existence. This story is not just a distant metaphor, it is an invitation to look at your own life with the same intensity as the warrior before the sword. What today seems weight may become path. What today seems defeat may reveal itself as preparation. Everything depends on how you observe, on how you sustain the gaze that shapes the field. What the craftsman revealed to the warrior was not just a theoretical lesson, but a silent practice of transformation. For this same perception to blossom in you, it is not enough to understand it with the mind. It must be experienced in the body, in the breath, in the inner space that opens when you place yourself as the observer. Close your eyes for a moment. Breathe deeply, without effort. Let the air enter and leave like a tide that moves on its own. Now bring your attention to the sounds around you. Perhaps a distant noise, perhaps a silence that pulses. Just notice. Do not catalogue, do not compare, just let them reach you. Little by little, something happens. You cease to be someone who listens to sounds and become the field where all sounds happen. Stay for a few moments in this place. What you observe is not only external. Also feel the sensations of the body, the weight in the legs, the vibration in the fingers, the heart marking its rhythm. Do not try to change anything. Allow yourself to be the space that receives. In this moment, you are not only the breath, nor the heartbeat, nor the sound. You are the one who sees all of this without being confused. This is the practice of the observer alive in you. Now, bring into this experience a recent memory that still brings discomfort. Do not fight it. Just bring it as one who holds a cold stone in their hands. Notice that there is a space between you and this memory. You observe it, and just because of that, it is no longer the owner of you. Notice how, by being observed, it loses part of its rigidity. It does not dissolve immediately, but ceases to be an absolute weight. Remain in this contact. See how the memory changes color, texture, just because it was seen with conscious attention. Perhaps you realize that it is not only pain, but also a sign of something that needs care. The observer in you does not deny the experience, but welcomes it and transforms it through the simple light of the gaze. This exercise does not need to last long minutes. It can be done at any moment. During a difficult conversation, before sleeping, in a moment of anxiety. The essential thing is to remember that you are not only what you feel or think, you are also the presence that witnesses. And this presence is like an invisible flame that never goes out. Some would call this practice meditation, others prefer to speak of contemplation. But beyond the names, what matters is the inner gesture of repositioning yourself. You cease to be imprisoned by the scene and become the space where the scene happens. The change may seem subtle, but it is enough to alter your relationship with everything around you. The body responds to this repositioning. The mind, which once ran in spirals of thoughts, finds a new rhythm. The heart slows down, tensions gradually dissolve. The observer not only brings clarity, it generates balance. It is as if life recognized in you a center, and from it could reorganize. And the more this practice is repeated, the more it becomes natural. No Herculean effort is needed, nor to withdraw from the world. It is enough to cultivate moments of return to this space. The simple act of observing alters the invisible threads that sustain your existence. Like the craftsman before the metal, each conscious gaze is a strike that shapes. But unlike brute force, it is a forge made of presence. If you bring this exercise into your life, you will realize that it is not only useful for dealing with intense emotions, it also enhances the flavor of what is light and beautiful. By observing a joy, you prolong it. By observing a simple gesture of affection, you make it even more alive. The observer not only dissolves pains, it intensifies presences. This practice is what turns theory into reality. It is not enough to know that the observer exists. It is necessary to let it manifest, not as a concept but as a lived experience. Close your eyes, breathe, feel, welcome. Become the space in which everything reveals itself. By realizing that you can become the space where everything happens, life gains another density. What once seemed too solid to be transformed reveals itself fluid, malleable, ready to take new forms before your conscious gaze. It is not about denying pain or glorifying joy, but about recognizing that both are transient, while the observer remains. This observer is not a new character you need to build. It is already there, silent, sustaining each experience from the beginning. What changes is your willingness to turn to it, to allow its presence to become clearer than the noises, firmer than the emotions, vaster than the thoughts. True transformation is born from this point, not from controlling the tide, but from recognizing that you are the horizon that contains it. Nothing that comes to you is capable of extinguishing this spark. In it lies freedom, clarity, and the possibility of creating new paths. Now, what you will do with this gaze is your choice. You can go on living dragged by events, or you can decide to be the conscious craftsman, forging meaning at each instant. The invitation remains open. Sustain your life from the observer and see how the world around reorganizes in response. If you have come this far, write in the comments, "I awakened the observer in me." This will be the sign that you walk to the end of this reflection. And if this content touched you in some way, subscribe to the channel and follow the next videos. There is much more to be revealed, and each encounter can open even more space within you.